Hey, soul family. If you feel like you've lost your mind or are losing your mind after spiritually awakening, this is for you. I'm going to share my story. Um, and I've held back a lot because now that I know the power of narratives and identifying with things or identifying with events in the past, I've held myself back from sharing the past. But if I can say that these things happened as my old self, like it's no longer relevant, it's no longer a thing, it doesn't actually exist. But I think this is important. So if you watched any other of my other videos, especially the playlist of the principles to embody the kingdom of heaven, you may have heard me mention dark events, and I don't go into them. But there's a series of events, which I now understand is my shadow projecting into the world, that happened in a very small amount of time. So I got divorced in July. While I was going through the divorce, I was also working on my business, pitching to investors, and it turned out that my devices were being surveillanced and I had been hacked. A lot of things were being controlled from somewhere else, like things about my business, my way to make income. So many things were limited. And it's almost like whenever I made progress in the business, there would be a move that would happen from the hacking that would counter my progress. I also experienced stalking. So, meaning phone calls, getting voicemails with cryptic messages, and even things being left at my house, things that had to do with the voicemails. And yes, I did go to the police, but they couldn't do anything because I didn't have enough proof. But what this all left me with was incredible paranoia, right? And the final thing I'll mention is I recall being followed by a man in the dark. I had to run to a neighbor's house, jump over a fence, and it was terrifying. So that's also what really started the paranoia. Um, and even before these dark episodes, there were darker things in my life too that I realized served as the trauma, which I kept perpetuating these narratives to invite the same things over again and again and again. And one of that was being conditioned to traffic myself. Um, Thankfully, I didn't ever do that. I was just scared of this person, and this happened in about 2016. And I was doing some things that I would not do normally. And I'm just grateful that it wasn't sexual at the time, but it was conditioning to like really weird things, you guys. Like I'm talking about like going to a stranger's house, letting them tickle your feet with feathers and then like get paid for it. Or taking pictures of yourself in a sports bra and then just trying to sell yourself, or selling pictures of my body. These things were encouraged for me to do, and I was just totally brainwashed. I was doing things I would not ever do. I was brainwashed to ask for money from my family. I was almost brainwashed to go on pills by this man. And then I realized so the whole battle for many years was trusting myself versus someone else. And I realized that I was not crazy, right? Oh, this is what's really happening. Like the amount of gaslighting and the amount of manipulation was incredulous. And so, over the years, I've had to sit with what led me to that. And then it's all about, well, if you're living in a state of survival, if you're living in a state of trauma response, right? So you're actually not living, you're just surviving. So at the time, in my old self was completely living in a trauma response, fawning. So what that means was it's almost like my frontal lobe was not there. There was no activity here. And it's almost like I was just blindly at someone's command if they trained me to do things Well, and I was trainable because my whole mind wasn't integrated, is the best way to say it. Um, I had a very weak sense of self, right? There's so many different ways to say it. But after realizing that it's we're all conditioned. We're all conditioned in some way, and we're all socially conditioned. Um, it really helped me understand like the power of the mind, you know. All right, so now let's, you know, that these things happened. The old self, they quote unquote supposedly happened. Okay, I say supposedly now because here I am now, years later, 2025, understanding that everything I ever experienced was a projection. Everything is a perspective because the world we live in is literally a projection of what is inside us. And I was only able to realize this after these final events recently, the things that I mentioned about the hacking and everything. You come to a point where you're like, I'm just so tired of suffering, and I was having really traumatic PTSD symptoms and all this shit, and you just are like, I don't want to suffer anymore. And you're invited to go within and say, well, why are you suffering? And you realize it's perspective. You realize that everything's an illusion. And then if you listen to Neville Goddard and you listen to Florence Scovel Shinn, for example, other teachers, Jesus, okay, also, who really teach about rebirth and letting the old self die, the ego. It's completely detaching from the world. And that means detaching from events, detaching from narratives, detaching from identities. And this is why on this channel, I teach that unconditional love is the basis for everything. Like, that has to be first and foremost, because when you do that, there's no shortcuts. When everything's unconditional love and everything's forgiven, and you're operating in a frequency of unconditional love, you're literally opening all the channels energetically, and things can come to you. You're not withholding anything from yourself. A multitude of sins is covered in love. What that means is like, so now I view sin as really the ego identifying not as the divine. That's the sin, identifying not as the divine, not as the creator, because we're all creators. So, and I'm saying all this because if you feel crazy, like there was a time I remember after my awakening or during my awakening where I felt like and remember the events I told you, right? I was already paranoid, but I felt like the world was a stage and everything was just a setup. And looking back, like all these things, even a paranoia, that was traces of my ego picking up on the reality of the world, that it is a stage, just as the mystics teach in India, that just as they've always known, just as the gurus have always known. You know, if you read the real yoga books, it talks about this, the samsaras, and how the world is a stage, and how it's all a play, life is a play, and you're just a director. And so I soon realized all these symptoms I was displaying was actually my spiritual awakening. And so it allowed me to finally accept that, number one, I am divine, that this human form is also an illusion, that I am an eternal spirit, I am eternal life, I am just energy. And that the circumstances don't shape me, I shape circumstances. If you've also ever read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I haven't read it, but I watched a YouTube video on it, so hopefully it summarized it accurately. I feel I did experience everything that book describes that you will experience in death if you haven't done the work in this lifetime, if you haven't had the preparation in this lifetime to go through the series of ego death to spiritually awake as a divine being, you're going to be tested after death. You're going to go through that after death. So this is the thing about spiritual awakening too, is it's death. It's death of the ego, death of the construct, death of illusion, and awakening to consciousness as yourself, as everything. And that there's only you here, and everything else and everyone is a projection of your consciousness. You're interacting with yourself. That's why Jesus said, and love others as yourself. They are you, you know? So you literally are losing your mind in the spiritual awakening, because the reasoning mind has to lose its grip, and the reasoning mind is the ego. There's no more reason left. There's no more reason left once you get to this point. And so if you also have maybe had some symptoms where you're like, what the hell is going on? And you're experiencing maybe mystical things. I've had a lot of mystical, odd things too happen. Synchronicities, you can call them. But, you know, just know this is part of it. And you're exactly where you need to be. And don't be scared of yourself. Don't be scared of your power. Lean into it. Ask for help. Ask for guidance with it. And then command. Just practice with it. Practice embodying the frequency you want to get the world to mirror that. This was kind of a banter, but I hope this, I know there's someone out there who can resonate with this. And there's bits and pieces that'll really speak to someone who went through what I did, who maybe has been hospitalized and maybe has been through some crazy shit that other people won't get, or won't even believe. And if that's you, I totally understand. And if you're at the point where you don't want to suffer more, and you're finally accepting that you are the creator of your reality, that everything is happening for you, that everything that has ever happened has happened for you to get to this moment, so you can be free of this reincarnation cycle for once and all, and create heaven on earth. It's already here. Then this channel's for you too. So I also wrote a book that's in the links of my videos too. And I'm happy to support you if you feel like you need support. That's in my link in these videos. But thank you for watching, and just keep going within. You're the answer you need, and everything is for you in the highest good of all. All right, see you.